morning. It's Sunday morning, and it's time to work on the train layout here at AAA Hobbies in Magnolia, New Jersey. Stop on by, come in and see how we're doing on this. You know, every Sunday we do a little bit more. This Sunday what I'm going to do is, last week we left off with putting all the base colors on the layout, with the exception of this little patch in the farmyard, which wasn't quite dry at the time. So I'm going to paint this first. Then what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take some of this Woodland Scenics stone color that I used to do the stonework on the between the levels, and I'm going to get some white paint, mix it in with this, and lighten it up maybe half and half in a jar. And then I'm going to take a nice stiff brush, wipe most of the paint off, and do what we call dry brushing. That's called painting with a dry brush. You get most of the paint off, then you just kind of scrub on the sides of the gray, and it'll highlight it and make everything jump out. And then we'll work on some of the turf around the farmyard. My first step here in painting the farmyard will be to take this paint here, and this is Woodland Scenics. It is earth colors. This is an earth colors kit, and what this has in it is a sample bottle, or a small bottle I should say, of all the different colors that Woodlands makes for painting a layout. We started out with these large bottles because we were doing really expansive areas. Now when I get down to these smaller patches and things, I'm going to take these smaller jars and use them. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to take the burnt umber color, and I'm going to thin it down. I'm going to take one of these mixing jars, and I'm going to put some of this paint in here, and then I'm going to take some water, because it's an acrylic based paint, and I'm going to thin it down about half and half, maybe a little more, so it's almost very watery. And then I'm going to take a nice brush, big brush, take some of that watery umber and just brush it over here, and it'll wash down into all the detail, and you'll see. Now I've mixed up my umber and water, and I've gotten it really nice and thin here. You can see I usually mix it up and just draw it up on the side of the jar to see how thick or thin it is. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do just what I said. I'm going to wash this over this area here, and it should bring up all the recessed details. So I'm just going to start pushing it in. You can see it. See, it's flowing down into the detail. And I'll do this all the way across this piece. And then after it dries, I'll go back and show you dry brushing, which is where we bring up the highlight detail with dryer paint. So it's time to dry brush. Now that my wash has dried, my dark wash, and you can see some of the detail on here, I've taken my base color, this ochre color, I added some white, and I mixed it up into a lighter ochre. So I'm just going to dip my hard bristled square brush into it, do the same thing that I've done on some of these other areas, and I'm just going to take most of the paint off this brush, so it's a dry brush. Then I'm just going to drag it across the surface of this area, and as I do this, it picks up all the highlights, and the dark colors stay in the recesses, and it gives it a very three-dimensional effect. So I'm just going to scrub this all over this. And I don't know if it's showing up on the video, but everything's just popping out at me now. I can see all the detail in the barnyard. So I'm just going to do this for a little bit, and then when that's done, we're going to put some turf on this area. So what we're going to do now is we're going to dry brush the gray areas on the sides of the layout. In other words, this is supposed to be, you know, rock outcropping, and we painted it last week with stone gray, which is a really dark color. And it's good to start with a dark color, because then what we'll do is we'll mix this gray with white, maybe half and half to lighten it up, and then we'll dip our brush in it. We won't thin it down because we want it thick. I may even let it dry a little bit. Put some on our brush, and we'll wipe the brush off till there's almost no paint on it, and then we'll just kind of brush or scrub across this area. I'm going to mix that up now, and I'll show you how it works. I've mixed my gray with white, and you can see I've got a lighter shade of gray here now. I'll put some on the brush. You can see the difference. And what I do is I put it on this stiff brush, and it's good to use a stiff, big, square brush for this. And I'll take a paper towel or towel, and I'm going to wipe off a lot of this paint. You can see I'm just going crazy here wiping it off. That's why it's called a dry brush, because you're going at it with a brush that's almost dry. So I've done that. I've taken some of the paint off. And what I'm going to do is come over here to my gray and just start scrubbing on it really gently. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's starting to bring out the detail. Is it? And what I'll do is I'll do this around the whole thing, and I put it on the brush, and always keep a lot of paper towels handy because you're going to go through a lot of them, and I wipe it off. You can see I took a lot of the paint off, and I just keep scrubbing on this. You can see, you didn't see this detail before I started, but now all the little details jumping out at me. And I can do this as light as I'd like. In other words, I'll start with this color, and if I think it needs a little bit more, I can lighten up the gray and go over it again. So I'm gonna do this around the whole perimeter of this piece and the whole perimeter of this piece and get myself a nice color. I've done the top level here with my gray. You can see I'm almost out here. And you can see the difference between the top and the bottom. They look the same originally, and now that I've dry brushed this, like I say, I take my gray and I just scrub across it. You can see it bringing out all the highlight detail, and it looks like stone. I may even put a little lighter highlight on it after that dries. So now I'm gonna go down and do the bottom level as well. I've put my buildings back on the layout here just to get a feel for where my turf will go. And we're gonna take some of this Woodland Scenics blended turf and some of the darker color turf here, and we're gonna do the farmer's yard first with the darker color, and then we're gonna put the regular blended turf around the other side. So when I'm finished, we should have just about everything landscaped. The buildings aren't done, obviously, I'll do those last. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this tacky glue, it's a white glue, and I'm just gonna put it in my container and paint it all around where I want the turf, and then I'm gonna sprinkle the turf on. So I'm taking my tacky glue, which I put in here. Basically, tacky glue is thick white glue, and I like it thick because it doesn't dry before I'm done putting it down. And I'm just gonna coat the whole farmer's yard here with this tacky glue. And notice I've got a line here for the building. I'm just gonna paint this right up to the edge of that line, edge of that pencil line. Another reason that I outline everything so I know what I'm doing, where things are. So now the tacky glue's down, you can see it all in there in the yard, and we're gonna take the blended turf. There's two tops on this turf. You can open it and put a spoon in and grab some and shake it off, or you can use the little holes on the one side to shake it on. That's kind of what I do. So I'm just gonna take this and very carefully just drop this stuff down here. It takes a little while, so. So now we have the turf down in the farmer's yard here. And I've glued it down on the bottom with tacky glue, but it's still loose on the top because it's a thick coat. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move the house, and I'm gonna use this scenic cement, and you can spray it or brush it on, and what we're gonna do is spray it on. So I've put it in a little atomizer bottle. These are both Woodland Scenics products. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of mist it over it, and it's hard to see on the video. It's hard to see on the video, but what I'm doing is just basically raining on the turf. I'm gonna get it a little bit wet. And you'll kind of get a feel. You'll see that it's saturated. And I'll let that dry, and it'll dry, and it'll look great. Now that the farmer's yard is done, we're gonna do the turf all around the farm, and we're gonna use a lighter blended turf. It's kind of a dark light blend so that it looks a little more wild and not quite, you know, like a manicured lawn. So I'm gonna put down the tacky glue, I'm gonna sprinkle this down, and then spritz it with some mister, and we'll be done. What did we accomplish today? We did a lot today, actually. We dry brushed our gray areas with some light gray so that it looks more like stone. We went in and put a wash of brown into the barnyard and then dry brushed that. And then we went back and put our turfs down in multiple colors and sprayed that down. So this level's coming along really well. We have to paint the buildings and get those done, and then move to the next level to do the turf and the groundwork. So stay tuned, come back next week, next Sunday, and check out our progress at AAA Hobbies in Magnolia, New Jersey.